going through the motions is the lessons and experience that you learn so much. I think Einstein says something like, information is not knowledge. You gain true wisdom through experience,
Hmm.
right? And I think that's, just to kind of recap all lessons, like going through this first home buying experience, with the brokers, with a builder, living in the property, right? Finding about all these HOA expenses, the property taxes, all these extra expenses incurring, moving to a different country, finding a property manager, making sure you vet them properly. So is that the only
Hmm.
job you do or not? How many other properties you have and so forth, and dealing with the refinances with the bankers, with the mortgage lenders and so forth. Just going through all of that sort of prepared me, because now I sort of, I got my feet wet in the real estate game. I learned the jargon with the lenders a little bit more, with talking with brokers, all that, and that sort of prepared me to be a little bit more comfortable in buying the next property, and the next property after that, and the next property after that. So I mean, to segue to my first buying experience, it's totally opposite,
It's quite
probably.
different, but I
Yeah, I
like the
mean, yeah,
contrast. I
yeah,
like the
yeah. I
contrast.
mean, yeah, it's quite different, because I wish I was kind of more like you, like, oh, I want to buy more of an investment opportunity, right? Investment property. For me, my first property was actually a place that I wanted to live in. To touch back that earlier, I was like, I just didn't want to pay rent anymore to a landlord. I wanted to, pay a mortgage, but use the money to buy something for myself. So my criteria for buying my first property was a place for me to live in. And back then I was like, I was a young dude, working in architecture world, and I really was looking for a bachelor pad. So this is what I was living. I was working down in San Jose at this time. I was living in Fremont with one of my good friends, and I was like, okay, I want my own place. So I was looking for someplace near work. I worked in San Jose, so I was looking in San Jose. So cut my commute time. So that was sort of like my criteria, close to work, and I wanted even more specific because I want to be that hip and cool kind of bachelor person. So I was looking
Mm,
for a loft. And back then in San Jose, there wasn't too much inventory. There wasn't that much inventory of lofts, back when I was looking, and when they came on the market, it kind of went right away. So, that was sort of like my criteria. It was pretty specific. I wasn't even looking at like, hey, is this going to cash flow or this and that, because I was going to be living in it.
yep.
I was more, going back to that episode two, I was looking more about kind of like what my monthly payments are going to be, which is sort of like, I don't know, it's like it's not atypical. I was just listening to another podcast where, especially when people buying their first property, they're more concerned with about the monthly payment than the actual purchase price, right?
Yeah.
So that
Yep.
was
Yep.
my
Yep.
kind of mentality. And maybe for future investments, that's probably the wrong mentality, or maybe not the right one, depending on on your investment goals and so. But yeah, I was just more about the monthly payment. Can I afford it? And on top of that, can I afford the other expenses that come with it? And that's a lesson that I learned, like, oh, I still got to pay HOA, and I still got to pay property tax. I still got to pay insurance. So, some people may just look at the monthly mortgage like, oh, that's it. But there's also other expenses to upkeep the property, even if you're living on that property. So I bought a property here. I can maybe share my screen.
Let's see it, Sherwin. Let's see what the bachelor pad looks like, man. I'm excited.
Yeah. Uh, hold on. Is it this one? I think it's this one. Okay. Can you see it?
There we go.
Okay, cool. So
One bed, two bath, 1,000 square feet.
yeah,
Got some
yeah,
sweet brick accents. I like that. And it's
yeah.
got a little
So
outdoor patio thing.
yeah, so it's a. I'm trying to look at my notes here. So it's a one bedroom, one bath that I purchased in December of 2005 for 437K, and I put down. I think I put down like 20. Oh, was it 10%? I think it was 10% because I had a good credit,
Hmm.
and I went with the builder's lender, so they gave me additional credit too if you go with the builders, because this was
Oh,
like,
the builder's lender. Okay.
yeah, this was
Yeah,
like, I
yeah.
think it was called Pulte Lenders. So just sort of like the back history. This was in Japantown in San Jose, and this this was actually it's a whole community of townhomes and lofts. So it used to be like a pickle factory back in the day, I think, and it's called Mariana Square. And then my building was like this small square building that it used to be the sales office to sell all the townhomes and the other lofts. So
Hmm.
once they sold all that, they converted this little building into four separate lofts. So this was four separate lofts all in one building. And the way I found it, I think I had a broker that I was using because I met her like through some other listing that I saw. And I don't think she found it for me. I found it, but I just kind of used her because I just
Yeah.
kind of like connected with her. But I found it online, whatever, and I went to it. I kept talking to the builders, and this was like sort of like they call it like a new build because it was rehab. Nobody's ever lived in there before. They just converted into kind of units, and the whole kind of buying experience was kind of unique because I think it was a lottery system, right? It's not too atypical from right now, like what's going on with like the brand new single family home. But back then, I was like, okay, it's a lottery system, so I didn't have to go through the whole kind of bidding war experience that a lot of people are going through right now, buying whether it's their first home, second home, or whatever home right now. So I remember the builders were telling, yeah, sure. And if you're interested, there's gonna be like a lottery thing at this weekend. I think it was over like a holiday weekend because I remember being in LA visiting some friends down in LA, and I was telling them, hey, there's this loft that I'm thinking about buying, but then um the lottery thing, the lottery open house is this weekend, but I'm down here. Like, yeah, let's go. So I literally cut my trip short to drive back to the Bay Area from LA and to attend this lottery system. So I remember showing up there. There's a few other people there. There's people there that just saw the loft like that day, and they were there and just so happened to find out about the lottery system. So they put their name in the basket or in the hat or
Mm,
whatever. And there were some other people that I recognized because like are my neighbors, I guess, because I saw them previously looking at other units, with them. So they were in there as well, and we literally, whoever was there at that time, we wrote our names on a piece of paper and put it like in a hat or a bag or something, right?
that's
And
crazy, dude.
yeah, to like the builder's a broker or whatever, whoever it was, I can't quite remember, but literally shuck it up. First name comes out, boom. I forget who
You?
it was. It was somebody.
Oh.
No, it wasn't me. It wasn't. I actually I don't recall the order. It might have been me. It might have been somebody else. But someone came up, and then I don't think I was the first one. But they're like, okay, blah 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 blah. Which loft do you want? One, two, three, four, and they pick like the back ones because you know the way the lofts are oriented, there's some are like in the front towards the street and some are in the
Mhm.
back, right? More private. So they pick the private ones in the back. And then luckily, I think I was third.
Yeah.
Boom, Sherwin Gonzalez over there.
That's
Okay, yeah.
crazy.
Which one do you want? And I'm like, I want the one that we're in right now because they're actually in the loft that
Yeah.
I got. So I was like, I want this one.
That's
And then,
awesome.
and then the last one came up, and it was I think it was a group of girls that was just happening to be looking at that day. They picked it, and they picked a loft like right next to me, my neighbor one, right, right next to me on the right side, which is kind of bummed out because my neighbor friend really wanted that loft, and he
Mm,
actually was talking to the builders way before me. He was like, I
mm.
want that one, I want that one, and he didn't get that one. His name didn't even get picked, and he stormed out of the place just mad because he didn't get picked, right? So then I'm like, oh man. So but then later on the girls dropped
They
off and he
backed
eventually
out.
yeah, so this is sort of like the location here.
Nice.
um
And then really quickly, Sherman. So you said
yeah,
you put about 10% down, you said?
yeah,
Because
so
you used the builders lenders, and then so you had
yeah.
some PMI to pay, but
Yeah,
okay.
S&P buy. So yeah, and the whole story was like yeah, because in the I think it's not a common like my house I purchased right now, I use the builders lenders because they give some type of incentive,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Yep.
So I did the same thing. So and 10% down back on the 430 cents, like a 43 or whatever it was,
43K,
right? Yeah,
44K.
yeah. And we were just talking about this earlier. So you put like 37, I think. So we kind of put about the same amount of money
Yeah.
into investment, except you did investment property. I kind of did a condo for me, right? So this was sort of like these are like most recent photos. This isn't like this was like the listing on Zyla right now.
I
So
love the brick though, for real. That's an
yeah,
ideal looking bachelor
yeah,
pad,
yeah.
man.
I mean, everything looks like except the flooring. I think they epoxy and put some type of pattern down there. Mine was just sort of like like concrete, and it was like
Yeah.
epoxy just plain gray, which is a little bit more industrial. So I wanted that
Yeah.
industrial look, and that's actually real brick. It's not like faux brick or anything, right?
I like it, man.
Yeah, I don't really like the furniture. It's not really my style. But yeah, it was like a small little starter condo for me or loft, 1,000 square feet, a lot of like good parties and good times here, right?
Dude,
You
I
can
would
see.
totally party with you there, man.
Yeah, and then the double height here with like sort of like the loft bedroom here. Everything's all open, and the kitchen here. So it was a brand new building. I mean,
And no
inside.
no one ever lived in it. You were the
Oh
first
yeah,
person.
yeah, yeah. I was the first person that lived in it, and sort of like the story. So I got in '05 in December of '05, and then as people know, I think it was like '08, the economy
Yep.
crashed, right?
Oh wait, oh
Right.
nine.
So then I'm like, oh crap. So that's when sort of property values just tanked, right? But I think I think Obama was president at the time. He had some type of program, like home loan modification program, where I could like keep my payment kind of stable through the next couple years or whatever. So I
Hmm.
think my monthly mortgage payment was like around $2,000 around that month. So this is around like oh eight, right? But before that, I remember I closed the property and I actually refinanced a property because buying in the Bay Area, the property appreciated a lot higher than I expect. I mean, a lot quicker than I expected, right?
Hmm.
So I was able to refinance and actually pull out the money that I put in because it appreciated that high, right?
You pulled all of the money out.
Yeah, I put
Most
it
of
all
it?
out. Yeah, yeah. I pulled most of it. I think most or all of it, right,
That's
out,
crazy. That's
right?
awesome. Yeah.
But then, no, this is where my naiveness, because I knew nothing about loans or mortgages and or whatever. I knew a little bit, right, to get in.
And
So
you
I
bought a
pulled it.
Lamborghini.
No, I pulled it out, and then all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute. So I have two loans. I have a first and a second now.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Because I was like, wait a minute. I
Yeah.
cashed out. It's like a cash out refinance, right? So now I
Yep.
have my first loan, which is my mortgage, and my second loan, which is paying off the interest off my cash out that I pulled out. But
Yep.
I was thinking, oh great, I just pulled out the money that I
Free
put.
money.
Boom, I'm a baller now, blah blah blah. And like, this is another lesson learned. And we could talk about recap. Like I wish I didn't use that money to invest in another property. That was my
Mhm.
mindset. I should have.
Yeah.
I kind of just held it there as kind of like reserve funds for me because I was like, oh man, I got a $2,000 mortgage. Wait a minute, I gotta pay HOA. Wait a minute, I gotta pay insurance. I gotta pay all these expenses, and I was like, didn't really take that into account when I was
Mhm.
running the numbers. I was just kind of looking at the mortgage payment, what I got income from. Oh yeah, so I kind of was using my savings to sort of bridge that gap of extra expenses, every
Uh,
month because I was still kind of living my lifestyle. I wasn't like eating like pork and beans and all that. I was still going
yeah.
out, having fun with my friends and all that. So, be better with your money. I know we can't run
Lesson
that.
learned. Know your
Yeah,
finances.
yeah. Lessons learned, right? Know the finances, but like I'm trying to look through my notes of what if I miss anything. But then yeah, it was just interesting, and then so I kind of rode the wave. And like in 2010, I moved away. I got a job offer in Shanghai. So I moved away to move to Shanghai. So I had that dilemma of whether or not should I keep the loft or should I sell it? And, this is like 2008, the economy crashed. So the values didn't go up yet in 2010. It was still pretty low. And if I sold the loft at that time, I would have lost money. I would have been underwater. Right.
Mhm.
So I was like, you know what? I'm going to keep it and I'm just gonna rent it out because my mortgage is only about 2,000 or whatever it was. I can probably rent it out for 2,500 or whatever it is, right? So I found a property manager. Mind you, this was like probably the most stressful because I was still packing up trying to figure out how to live in Shanghai.
Yeah.
Right? I never lived in another country, so I was trying to do that, trying to figure out, a property manager to manage my loft and all that. So I found one, boom, 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 did it, set himself up, and then I went off to another country and they sort of manage it for me. And I don't even remember if I even like I didn't have monthly calls with them. Everything was through emails. But in San Jose, in Japantown especially, it's a pretty popular location. They had no problems finding a tenant or resident there. I think they were paying a little bit over $2,000 a month. So here's the thing though, my resident was paying enough rent to cover my mortgage, but I still had to pay HOA, taxes, and
HOA.
insurance. So
Yep.
that was still coming out of my pocket, but in my mind it was like, oh, as long as they're paying a majority of the expenses, which is a mortgage, I'm okay with that. Because my time now I sort of flipped to an investor kind of mindset, right? Where it's like, okay, my mindset was like, I just need enough to stay afloat, right? It's like I was, kind of go back to like, I'm from Hawaii, right? Like you're surfing, right? Sitting on your board, just waiting
Mhm.
for that next wave. Just paddle, paddle, paddle. Just stay afloat. Wait. So I was waiting, have my resident pay the mortgage, pay the mortgage. In the meantime, I'm kind of like paying the rest of the expenses, but I still had that, I pulled out cash. So I had that reserves from
Mhm.
there. So that's what my cash that I pulled out was going towards, curve like that, the extra expenses. And also I used it to help kind of my move into Shanghai,
Mhm.
right? So that kind of bridged that gap, and I was just waiting, floating, waiting, and eventually real estate goes back up because it's cycles. It's usually like 10-year cycles.
Mhm.
I bought in 05, 2015,
Yep.
went
There we
back up
go.
again, right?
Yep.
So and then I remember in between that, like I went through a few property managers because one kind of like quit, but it was cool because they kind of referred a friend, so I just went with that. And this is all me kind of doing everything in Shanghai. I was only there for like maybe a little bit over a year, but it was like, okay, I need to switch property manager. So I was kind of like investing out of state, I guess. Only for a few months. But then
Yeah.
I also hated having that second mortgage So, when my, the value of my property actually started getting higher and higher, higher again, and started appreciating, I was able to refinance and just merge it into kind of one loan now again.
Yeah.
So I refinanced a few times, and I learned a lot through like the loan process of, what lenders look for, how much the property has appreciated, and so forth. So it was a pretty interesting experience. And I'll show, like, I have like there's actually like the listing. I found it like back then.
Oh, the original listing, huh?
Yeah. So I sold it.
Oh,
So
when you sold it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, actually when I sold it, right? So I had a kid in 2015, and I bought a house in Oakland, and my wife was like, "You got to sell your loft. We need some, we need some, some family
You
funds."
gotta,
Like, "Oh, it's my bachelor
you gotta
pad."
buy diapers and stuff, man. Come
Yeah,
on.
yeah, yeah. So I listed at 538, 888. Got to get the lucky number eight for
Oh
the
yeah.
Asian buyers, right? That's actually my broker back. That's my aunt, right?
That's
This
so
is like the
funny.
pictures back then. You can see, like, didn't have the fancy epoxy flooring and all
Yeah.
that stuff, right? And then, I remember like getting a few offers, and I had one ready to go under contract. And literally, I think I was at the Alameda County Fair, and then we were about to sign this buyer. But I was about to sign that contract that day, and literally the final hour, like, my aunt was like, called me a broker, was like, "Hey, we got an all cash offer, close in 10 days. Do you want
Ooh.
that one?" I go, "Yep, I want that one." So
Heck
we
yeah.
went with that one, and sold it for, I think it was like 540 or 530 or whatever it was. Exact, I wasn't sure if it was the exact amount. So,
Yeah.
I made a 100K equity from, bought
There you
for
go.
37, sold for 538, but that was over like what,
10
almost 10
years.
years, 10
Yeah.
years. I didn't cash flow. I had negative because I was paying, all that. But then that's sort of like, I guess I got lucky because of the appreciation in the Bay Area. I made, of course I had to pay capital gains tax and all that. And if I minus all my expenses, I still made money on this. And right now, this is sort of like heartbreaking, sort of what you said. So this is like Redfin, right? It just sold for 730. And then, like
Oh
this,
man.
you go back to this island, and then we shoot it like
Wow,
looking like,
literally February 26th, like literally a
yeah.
few weeks ago.
Yeah, yeah, and it's worth like 740. And I had
Yeah.
this listing. It actually was listed for a while, and I think it went back and forth. So,
Yeah.
but that's real estate,
Here's
right?
the
And
thing. That's the thing, man. Like
yeah,
this is how we started that snowball. This is how we got started.
mhm,
You have to start somewhere, and
yeah,
you can't look back in hindsight and say, oh, that was a bad move, right? Like this is
yeah,
what got you into the real estate world. And this is what got you curious about the investing world.
yeah.
And this is without that property, you probably wouldn't be where you are at right now. So
No, I mean, I know, like, I don't have a fancy spreadsheet like you, because like I didn't calculate all the fancy stuff. I was kind of doing everything. I was really naive, but then
yeah,
this was like how I got my feet wet into real estate investing. I mean, like, I lived in the property. I didn't really do anything. It was a loss, so it was like not too much value I could add,
yep,
right? And then
yep,
when I moved out, that's when I guess you can say I was a full-time investor, because now I was renting out the property, right? But then, a couple things I learned, I was like, okay, have have working capital day one, just for
yep,
anything. Like when you
yep.
buy something, because, especially if you buy your first home or whatever your property is, like, you got to buy, you want to buy new furniture, right?
Hmm, hmm.
I mean, this is not maybe investment. It's more like personal preference. Like, you get a new place, you want to buy new furniture. So I was like, instead of exhausting all your funds on a down payment, have some working capital for furniture if you want, or even just for expenses for repairs, right? I
Yep.
wasn't too concerned about repairs because it was with a builder, and they had like a home warranty for like up to a year. So if anything
It was a
broke,
brand new property.
exactly.
Plus,
So
your
yeah,
exterior and roofing is all covered by HOA.
exactly. Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. Exterior, roofing, landscaping was all covered. That's kind of the benefits of getting a condo. You don't have to worry about all that versus like a single family home, right? And then with property managers too. I mean, I interviewed a few property managers before I moved away to Shanghai, and I found a good one. But what I realized later on was that this property manager could have been renting the property for a lot higher than
Oh.
what they're renting before. This was just kind of like, I think they were a broker before. I mean, they're,
Hmm.
they're, they're a real estate agent or broker that manages properties on the side. And this is sort of the lesson I learned later on, because it happened to me just recently. I think I mentioned to you, Tyler, like, over the
They're
weekend.
not specialized in that area.
Yeah, they don't just focus on managing properties. It's sort of
Yep.
like their side gig, right?
Yeah.
So they had their kind of real estate firm or real estate site or whatever. That's their main gig. And they're more concentrated on that part of their business. And property management was sort of like their side hustle just to make some side income,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
Which is totally valid, but they weren't really, I guess, focused on kind of like, oh, I just, I can rent it out for maybe $500 more, but this is more stable and I'm still getting my percentage off, the rental income,
Yeah.
right? Because I remember when I was selling the property, and my aunt, who's a broker, was like, "That's all you're renting it for? You can be making this much, And then, and it always goes back. They always ask, "Sure, why'd you sell?" Because right now I could be renting it out, and I would be cash flowing. I mean, I buy it
Mhm.
for 37. I was paying down my mortgage. I
Yeah.
would be totally cash flowing right now, but
You
you
had a
know,
30-year fixed rate mortgage probably.
yeah, yeah, and there's, but
So
then
your expenses would still be $2,000 a month,
yeah,
and you
oh
can
yeah,
get that thing for a lot more now in San
oh
Jose.
yeah, and I love showing that listing to my wife. But then it goes back to sort of like my goals and my why, right? So 2015 was my son was born, and that totally changed kind of like my why, my goals. Now my why is I want to be the best dad I can be,
Yep.
right? And then we have a family, we need some reserves, some cushions. So I was like, okay, let's sell this loft and get some reserves, and that's why I sold it for my
Yep.
family. In
Mhm.
hindsight, maybe I should have waited and held on, but then that parlayed me. We used that money, that sales money, for cushion for our family, and
Mhm.
also to buy our first 2 unit in Sacramento.
Exactly.
So that's when they introduced me to the multifamily world, and sort of like, you know, I kind of took the lessons I learned from all the refinancing, from all going through the motions, is the lessons and experience that you learn so much. I think Einstein says something like, information is not knowledge. You gain true wisdom through experience,
Mhm.
right? And I think that's, just to kind of recap all lessons, like going through this first home buying experience, with the brokers, with a builder, living in the property, right? Finding about all these HOA expenses, the property taxes, all these extra expenses incurring, moving to a different country, finding a property manager, making sure you vet them properly. So is that the only
Mhm.
job you do or not? How many other properties you have and so forth, and dealing with the refinances with the bankers, with the mortgage lenders, and so forth. Just going through all of that sort of prepared me, because now I sort of, I got my feet wet in the real estate game. I learned the jargon with the lenders a little bit more, with talking with brokers, all that, and that sort of prepared me to be a little bit more comfortable in buying the next property, and the next property after that, and the next property after that. So, I mean, we go back, it was like our first couple episodes, right? Just take action, just
Yep.
jump in and take
Take the
flight.
jump, take the leap, baby.
Right. So I don't know. I think I mean, that's sort of my first buying experience. And, I don't know. It'd be good to hear some like people comment down below of like, sort of like what lessons you learned from buying your first property, or maybe you haven't bought your first property. If you have any questions, maybe, Tyler and I could help out, or, one of our listeners could, help out, you buying
Definitely.
your first property, whether if it's a investment property or a property that you want to live in, so.
Yeah. No, I think what we'll do real quick is just do a little recap on some of the biggest lessons learned. And I know
Mm,
we touched on a number of them throughout our stories, but really I think the biggest theme that I always generally push is just get started. And I think even though maybe that first investment, well, first of all, like your why, Sherwin, kind of evolved through the years, and mine's
mm,
been pretty constant with the whole, investing for the goal of family and time and freedom. But
mm,
um yeah, just literally buying that first property taught us both so much about the real estate industry,
mm.
and it's progressed and gotten us to where we are now. But like even when you were saying like, yeah, just looking at a contract for the first time, just talking to a
Yes.
insurance agent for the first time, like learning what a HOA is for the first time, like that all has to be done if you want to progress in this real estate industry. So you have to get started, learn from your mistakes. And really, I learned a lot more about partnerships, working with people on the ground remotely, similar to you with you being in Shanghai, and kind of managing your property from afar.
Mm,
But learned about location, learned about, again, taking action on red flags immediately rather than pushing them off,
mm.
and then trying to target higher priced, higher quality neighborhoods. For me personally, that's my
Mm,
strategy now. So
yes.
those are some of the biggest things I learned from that first property. And I literally would not be where I am today without buying that property and taking that chance. So um, you want to give us your kind of bullet pointed lessons learned from that first one, Sherwin?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think you kind of, you hit all the key points. I mean, we've always been, it's kind of like a theme. We've said it in every episode, kind of like just start,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Like, like I remember buying my first property. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know I didn't really fully understand the mortgage lending world. I still don't, right? I
Yeah.
keep saying every time, right? But just start, because then, like you mentioned, you get into escrow. That's another game. Going through inspections, going through all the different steps that happen in escrow, right? And then closing, and then learning after that. I mean, like for me, it's like just start, do it, and just learn. Learn by experience. I think that's probably like the key thing. You're not going to have all the answers, but you can learn so much just by experiencing it, right? But then do what you do, make calculated risks. Like in the beginning, do your research, do enough so you feel comfortable making this investment property. And it's funny because in our paths are different, right? You went through
Mhm.
like the investment route. I went through like, I'm going to buy my first place to live in, and then eventually became an investment property,
Yeah.
right? And you and I, like, the sort of the parallels, like we put almost the same amount of money down, right, and
Yep.
had
Yep.
different results. But then the takeaways are pretty much almost the same, almost, right? I mean, you did more partnerships because you were, working with a turnkey property and all that. But I did partnerships with a property manager and so
Mhm.
forth. And I think later down in my investment career, you know, real estate is a relationship business. I think, first thing,
100%.
like any other business,
100%.
right?
100%. Yeah.
Who you work with, the brokers you work with, the lenders you work with, the people, the investment partners that you work with, the relationships that you have. And I think that's one takeaway of, kind of like our show is like, building up relationships, learning off people's experiences. I hope, people can take our stories, sort of learn off them. And if they're interested in learning more, contact us, comment below, and we'll be more than happy to sort of like get into more detail, I guess, to what we talked about. But yeah, I mean, just start, take action, and like you might not realize the lessons that you're learning now, but later down in the years you realize, oh, it'll connect the dots later
Yeah.
on. And I remember that,
Yeah.
like to this day, I'm like still using, the lessons I learned from my first property into buying my properties right now. Granted, they're more investment kind of properties, but it segued me into, like, like I mentioned earlier, buying my first small multifamily property. And then I learned it from buying my next property, where I was like, my property in Oakland, I was like, okay, I'm gonna do like a live-in flip to add value, to force appreciate versus like a condo, right? So a
Mhm.
condo is hard
Mhm.
to kind of appreciate. I mean, so I go, let me buy live-in flip so I can force appreciate and kind of like learn off that. Because then I did the same thing what I did with my loft. I did a cash out refinance. Right, I pulled out the carrot because then I forced appreciate. I did it a lot quicker now, but I learned
Yeah.
the lessons from what I learned from my first property. Oh, and I was smart, but I did that cash out refinance to buy another property. It's kind of like,
Yep. Yep.
instead of me kind of horse. So I learned my what I mistakes that I made from the first part to do that, and so forth. So I mean, that was kind of like blabbing around to like a bunch of different tangents there.
Well, so why don't we're gonna start wrapping up this episode, but
Yeah.
and I did want to make one comment. Like
Mm,
you mentioned real estate's a relationship business, but I always take it a step further. Like literally, life is about relationships, like
yeah.
just life in general. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's so important in this world, whether
Mm,
that's personal or business. But meet people, have conversations, connect with people that have similar mindsets and strategies, and try and figure out how you can provide value to each other.
mm,
That's really the key to life.
yeah.
So I think the last part we're going to kind of go over. Let's just briefly touch on, maybe how we took and kind of transitioned from that single family slash
Mm,
condo world to
yeah.
multifamily and kind of where we're at right now. And then we're going to end off with kind of one last question for both of us. But
Mm,
sure, when you want to talk about just super briefly, maybe what your current portfolio looks like and how you took
mm.
that experience from a condo to where you're at now in multifamily.
Yeah. So, well, currently I have like 7 doors. My wife and I have our own kind of side portfolio. We have 7 doors that we have right now. And I started my company Flight in 2018, 2019, where we mainly do commercial multifamily syndications, but now entering the self-storage asset kind of a class right now. For Flight, we currently have, I believe, we've had eight properties so far. We exited three. So this is like in the span of like the past 2 years or so, right? So that's sort of like my current portfolio. But just to quickly dive in, like back when my son was born in 2015, I really just wanted to like maybe buy one or two properties every year for the next 5 years, and then 1031 into like a big 16 unit property, right? And then it was during this time I kind of ran into my partner Paul. We'll get into this more story later on. And we're like, we had similar goals. We had young families. We had a young kid just born and all that. He had similar goals, and we're like, why don't we just partner up and buy a big multifamily property right now? And that's sort of what delved me into the syndication. I didn't know what a syndication was back then either.
Mm-hmm.
And I never even thought about partnering up, because a lot of the times you hear on podcasts or bigger power or whatever sites are like, so many people want to do it on their own, right?
Yeah.
So I never even
Yep.
thought about it. I was like, yeah, I want to partner up because it mitigates my risk. I never bought like a big multifamily property before on my own, and I'm kind of, scared doing that all on my own. If I have a partner on the side or partners, I'm not doing it by myself. I
Yep.
share the risks. I mean, I share the rewards, but then I mitigate the risk because we all share the risk. So, I mean, we'll dive more into that, but that's sort of like my portfolio right now, and it's kind of like a good segue. How about you? What's your current crop of
I mean,
investments?
I'd say we have somewhat similar portfolios now. I mean, you're definitely much more, we'll call it, you have much more growth and responsibility in the syndication world than I do. But so I own a single family out in Indianapolis still. I have a duplex out there as well.
Mm,
And then I've invested passively. My transition to kind of the multifamily world was the going the LP route. So
mm,
essentially exchanging my capital for equity in larger deals.
mm,
I have deals now in Louisville, two in Phoenix, and then one in the Bay Area. And then I also, from some of those experiences as an LP, coming in as a limited partner, um, transitioned some of my skills to the GP world as well, where I'm a GP in a deal out in Mesa, Arizona,
mm,
which is kind of close to Phoenix and the Tempe area. So it really transitioned from single families, duplex world, doing everything on my own,
mm.
to then exploring the world of partnerships. And, I also think that's been super helpful for me. And it was kind of a mindset shift as well, because I started off wanting to do everything on my own. I wanted to buy single
Yep.
families, duplexes, quads on my own. I
Mm,
wanted to have 100% equity in these deals. I
yeah.
wanted 100% cash flow. I wanted everything. And then I was like, well, I could actually expand my portfolio
Mm,
and actually accelerate my growth if I were to partner with people. And that's what I've been doing the last, 3 years. But I also didn't even know what a syndication was until 3 years ago.
yeah.
And I didn't even know that was possible. I was like, same with you, man. It's like, how do I could never buy an 80 unit.
Yeah.
I could never buy a 164 unit,
Yeah.
but with partners and people that have experience and more knowledge than myself, if I
Mm,
if I can attach myself and provide some value to them,
yeah.
and vice versa, that's how you grow. So,
Yeah, yeah. It's funny.
yeah,
I was hanging out with a friend from out of town this weekend, and like he was asking, "What do you do, Sherwin? I want someone to just, if I give you the money, can you do all the work for me?" I go,
yeah.
"Yeah, that's what a syndication. I'm on the GP side.
You're
Like,
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 yes, I
yeah,
can
yeah,
do that. I
yeah.
can
You
do
can
that for
invest
you.
money, and that's the beauty about syndications. And we won't go. This is like a good segue of kind of like our next kind of crop of episodes and talking about like the syndication role. But even before we get to that, it's kind of good. Like you have a good crop of properties, that you manage. I have a bunch of investment properties that we manage, and we're going to dive into this to the next episode. So how are we managing all of these properties right now, and sort of like our transition into working full time into REI and back.
And
That's
back for me,
that's a little thing. Like when we wrote this,
yeah.
kind of like our episodes, we're like, all right, this will be great, and then Tyler will have an interesting story about his situation.
Yeah,
We'll dive into
we'll
it.
give a little bit of foreshadowing, but yeah, I think
Yeah.
our next episode is going to be more about kind of our involvement in our day to day life
Mm-hmm.
in the real estate industry. But I
Mm-hmm.
think there's always a debate out there, full time real estate versus a full time job, and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people think the chains that lock you down with a full time job is just all evil, but there's benefits to both.
Yep.
Full time life in the 9 to 5 world versus full time life in the real estate world. But
Yep. Yep.
my last question for you, Sherwin,
Yeah.
before we wrap things up,
Mm-hmm.
is what would you do differently in buying your first property? If you could kind of go back in time,
Mm-hmm.
what would you
Uh,
do differently?
I wish. I mean, back then I was a young, naive bachelor, whatever. Want to buy a bachelor pad of my own and live my own. I wish hindsight now it's a little bit easier to say this, but like I wish I bought a house in San Jose
Hmm.
and literally just house hack. I didn't know what house hacking was. Literally just rent out the rooms to my buddies and my friends. So it's almost like a big frat house,
Yeah.
right? But then it's my property, it's my house, and have them pay down the mortgage for me. So I have kind of like tenants or residents there, but those are my buddies and friends, and it's almost like a good kind of party house like that. So I wish I kind of did that, because now probably that house wouldn't appreciate a lot higher than the condo,
Hmm.
right? You know,
Exactly.
right. So, I mean, I wish I did that more. I wish I was more kind of investor minded like you, like kind of get the best of both worlds. Like, yeah, I want to buy a place for me to live in and not pay mortgage,
Yep.
but also be an investor at the same time, where I'm kind of like a landlord and rent out the other rooms so that, they can pay down the mortgage and, help supplement, that expense. So I don't have to come up with a whole mortgage payment, on
Hmm.
my own. So that's probably what I would do probably differently. You go back and start house hacking, how about you? What do you
Yeah,
have
I
done
think I
differently?
think luckily what I would do differently, they're all aspects of my investing career that I have now kind of implemented. But
Mm,
the first thing is I wouldn't have bought all cash.
mm,
I now choose to use leverage and use the
mm,
power of leverage to expand portfolio and et cetera
mm,
quicker and faster. I would have bought in a better neighborhood, which I started doing anyways.
mm,
I would have started buying properties that had a higher income slash rental rate,
mm,
just to kind of help cover unexpected expenses better.
mm,
Um, and then I would have vetted my partners better, which
mm,
I do now. I'm very conscious of like who I work with.
mm.
It's not just a, hey, I met you one time and we had an email exchange and I think you're awesome, let's work together. It's like
Yeah.
it's cool. Like even our relationship has blossomed over the last year. But it's like, really, if you're going to decide to work with someone, whether it's a property manager or even an insurance agent or a listing agent or anything, like I strongly personally recommend getting to know the person on a personal level, on a business level. And it's going to take, it takes more than just a quick conversation on the phone and two emails back and forth to
Yeah.
really vet and know who you're working with. So
Mm,
yeah, buying in better locations, vetting people that you work with properly, even more so.
mm.
And using leverage, I think, are the big takeaways from
Yeah.
my first property.
No, I just learned a lot just hearing about your first investment property.
Yeah, 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 definitely, man.
I mean, that's the thing about the beauty of real estate and just an entrepreneur, I guess. Like, you never stop learning, right? And I think prior to our episode, we're like, I didn't really know your story of your first
Yep,
investment
yep.
property, so I was like, don't tell me. I want to hear it. I want to hear it in this episode, so you get my true reaction and so forth.
Yeah,
And you know, and and it's great because I love hearing these stories. So it'd be great if the viewers or listeners out there, tell us your story, or we'll love to hear your stories and experiences, because it'll be great to kind of learn off each other,
yeah,
right? And there's little things you can kind of take away from everybody's experience, and that's what this whole show's about, right?
yep.
Investing in real estate, real talk,
Real
and
talk,
just
baby.
just just sharing our stories and experiences. And I hope a lot of the viewers and listeners out there got some value out of this. You know, like, subscribe,
Like and subscribe, baby.
right?
And I
Hate to
think
keep saying that. You keep saying that every time, but it'd
that,
be great to get that support, right?
and this is just the beginning. I mean, this is episode 3.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think the cool thing is, like, you're going to, as a viewer, see how we get better at this whole format and everything.
yeah.
And we're going to start even inviting some guests on as well in the
Yes.
future, and getting some different perspectives and
Yeah.
trying to spice things up here and there. And so, like, we're learning, and hopefully you're finding
Mm,
value here. And that's the biggest thing for us, is we want to make sure the viewers are learning from us.
yeah.
And we're no experts by any means, but we
Mm,
have some experience,
yeah.
and we're trying to just share exactly what we learned along the way.
Yeah. No, good points, Tyler. It won't just be you and me all the time. The first couple episodes we're sort of set up for, like, tell our story so people get to know us,
Yep,
right?
exactly, exactly.
Be vulnerable, tell our stories, get to know us, and then, we'll talk about the syndication world, and then, maybe bring on some guests here and there, start analyzing offering memorandums, start analyzing deals, and so forth. So there will be, you know, more content, I guess, in-depth content in
Oh
future
yeah.
episodes and
No,
future shows, and so forth. Right
we
now,
got
it's just kind of like
ideas, man.
building up kind of like our audience, building up who we are, and, just telling us,
We got a lot of,
our
I think we
stories.
got a lot of cool ideas, and
Yeah.
we just gotta, you gotta stick with us and let us show you those ideas in the
Yeah.
future.
We just gotta take action.
Exactly, exactly. So I
No, that's
think, Sherwin, with that, man, I think
yeah.
this is the end. I mean, I don't know how else to end it other than it's been real, dude.
Yeah, it's been real, guys. So stick around, listen to the next episode. So catch you guys in the next one. Later.
Peace.